You need to hear what happened to the last group that camped off Skyline Drive in the spring of 2015, because 2 of them never came home, and the one who did still can't explain what he saw. In April of 2015, deep in the backcountry of Shenandoah National Park in the Appalachian Mountains, 3 coworkers from a Harrisonburg call center drove out for a 2-night trip off a fire road to blow off steam before Monday's shift. Everything was routine until the second night, when one of them walked off alone to relieve himself, and came back saying there was a tiger in the woods. The others laughed. They shouldn't have. By sunrise, 2 of the 3 men who pitched that camp were gone. Search teams spent days combing that hollow off Skyline Drive and found nothing. No bodies, no gear, no tracks that made sense. The park's official incident log lists it as a bear encounter. The survivor has never accepted that explanation. What you're about to hear is his account. His name is Bryson, and this happened to him. Bryson Calloway was 21, and most of his life happened inside a headset. He worked claims intake at a call center in Harrisonburg, 9 hours a day, counting down to Friday like everybody else on the floor. Charlie Denning and Jason Marsh worked that same floor. Different cubicle rows, same break room, same countdown clock behind the coffee machine. The 3 of them had made this exact trip a dozen times. A fire road site off Skyline Drive, cheap dome tents, a cooler that was mostly beer and ice by the time they parked. Nothing new, and that was sort of the point. Monday brought a mandatory floor meeting none of them wanted to think about, which meant 2 nights was all they had before their headsets went back on. So they pushed in further than usual. Jason wanted real quiet, away from the RV crowd, and he found it. A spot closer to the ridge, where the fire road narrowed into a trail they'd never taken before. At the trailhead, a weathered wooden post marked the boundary. 4 deep gouges were scored into it, high up near the top edge. Jason barely looked at it. "Bear scratch," he said, and kept walking. Charlie didn't say anything. Nobody stopped to measure how high those marks actually sat, and if they had, the number wouldn't have made sense. Not for a bear, not for anything that's supposed to live in these mountains. By the time the tents were up, the light was going fast, and the 3 of them fell into the same easy back and forth they always did, needling Jason about some girl in accounting, arguing over nothing, comfortable and loud the way old friends get when the woods start turning dark around them. Underneath all that noise, something was missing, and none of them clocked it. No birds settling in for the night. Not one. At that hour, in that kind of forest, that silence should have meant something. Somewhere in the middle of that conversation, Bryson caught it. A shift at the edge of the tree line, low to the ground, gone before his eyes could turn it into a shape. He didn't say a word, told himself it was nothing, that he wasn't about to be the guy who spooked everybody over a shadow. That was the moment Charlie stood up, grabbed the headlamp off his pack, said he had to go pee, and walked off alone into the dark. Right as Bryson was still deciding whether what he'd just seen was even worth mentioning. Charlie wasn't gone more than 4 minutes. Bryson knew that because he'd checked his phone right when Charlie walked off, out of habit more than anything, and he checked it again the second he heard Charlie come crashing back through the brush. 4 minutes, that's all it took. The side trail Charlie had gone down cut off from camp at an angle, maybe 30 feet from where their tents sat, curling around a thick stand of rhododendron before it dropped toward a little dry creek bed. It wasn't far. Close enough that Bryson should have heard something coming from way out before Charlie was already right on top of them again. Charlie's headlamp beam was bouncing everywhere, jerking across the trees like he couldn't hold his own hand steady. He was breathing wrong, the kind of breathing that comes out in short little pulls instead of full breaths, and by the time he hit the edge of camp, he was already talking. "There's a tiger," he said. "Right there." Watching him. Not a bear, not a shape in the dark he couldn't place. A tiger, striped, low to the ground, crouched about 30 feet off the little side trail he'd stepped down to do his business. He said it twice, like saying it again might make it sound less insane the second time. Jason lost it laughing. A tiger in Virginia, out here in the Blue Ridge. He said it was the funniest thing he'd heard all trip, and he said it loud enough that it carried, loud enough that it felt less like a joke between friends and more like he wanted something out there to hear him. That's when the two of them really showed who they were. Charlie has always been the guy who believes what's right in front of his own eyes, whether it makes sense or not. He's the one who pulled over on the interstate once because he swore he saw a deer standing in the median that turned out to be a torn-up tire. Jason's the opposite. If he can't touch it, it isn't real, and he'd built half his personality on being the guy who never got spooked. Bryson sat between them, saying nothing, holding on to the thing he'd seen at the tree line 10 minutes earlier that didn't line up with a tiger at all. Underneath the arguing, something else showed up. A smell, wet and heavy, more like a slaughterhouse floor than any animal den, rolling off the tree line in warm little pulses that didn't match the cool night air one bit. It came and went, stronger for a second and then almost gone, like something out there was breathing it out on purpose. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody wanted to be the second person that night to say something that sounded crazy out loud. Charlie swore the thing had blinked at him, slow, on purpose, like it knew exactly what it was doing. And then he just stopped talking, right in the middle of his own sentence, because it hit him that none of them had thought to ask what color its eyes were. Jason grabbed his own flashlight off the picnic table, said he was going to prove there was nothing out there, and started walking toward the tree line to end the whole argument himself. He didn't get more than a few steps. 50 feet out, the brush was already moving, low to the ground in a straight line, cutting hard against the direction the wind was actually blowing. The three of them stood together at the edge of camp and watched it. Nobody moved. Nobody talked. The fire had burned down to almost nothing behind them, just enough orange light left to throw their shadows out long across the dirt. And beyond that, the whole tree line was just black shapes, stacked on black shapes. The brush kept sliding along that same straight line, slow and deliberate, right up until Jason's flashlight beam finally landed on it. And then it stopped. Dead. Like it had been waiting the whole time to see if the light would find it. And now that it had, there was no reason left to keep moving at all. Jason didn't like being watched like that. He didn't like it one bit. He'd spent the whole night being the guy who wasn't scared, and now, standing there with his flashlight locked on a patch of brush that had gone completely still, he decided he wasn't going to be the guy who backed down either. He figured Charlie was messing with him. Maybe both of them were. And if that was true, he was going to walk right into those trees and prove it. So he did. He went crashing into the tree line, yelling, at Charlie, at whatever was out there, at all of it. Come on then. Show yourself. That kind of yelling. The kind that's part anger and part something else nobody wants to admit to. His flashlight beam bounced through the trees for a minute, jumping branch to branch, and then it was gone. Just like that. No sound of him tripping. No yell cut short. The light was there, and then it wasn't. 10 minutes went by. Bryson checked his phone again, that same habit, and 10 minutes felt like an hour standing at the edge of that camp with nobody answering when he called Jason's name. It was already past 10 at night. Monday's floor meeting, which had felt like the biggest deal in the world 24 hours earlier, was now the last thing on Bryson's mind. Charlie wanted to leave. He said it straight out. Grab the truck keys, drive until they hit a spot with cell signal, get real help instead of playing hero in the dark. It wasn't a bad plan. Honestly, it was probably the smart one. Bryson almost agreed with him right there. But something about leaving Jason out there, even for the 20 minutes it would take to drive somewhere and back, felt like a decision he wouldn't be able to take back later. So he made the call. They'd go together. Right now. No truck, no waiting. That decision is the reason two of them didn't walk out of those woods instead of one. The trail into the trees wasn't a trail at all. Not really. More like the memory of one, half covered by low branches that Bryson had to shove out of the way with his bare hand. If you looked close, you could still see the faint boot-worn line running under the leaves, just wide enough for one person to walk single file. Cold sap glued itself to his palm the second he touched one branch, thick and sticky in a way that didn't match the season. The ground under his boots kept shifting wrong, soft in spots where roots should have been solid, like the whole forest floor had gone spongy overnight. Charlie's hand was locked around Bryson's forearm the entire time, gripping so hard it left marks that were still there 2 days later when the Rangers took his photo. They called Jason's name. Nothing answered. They called again. Still nothing. At some point, Bryson realized the trail behind them didn't line up anymore. Brush that hadn't been there on the way in was now blocking the path back, thick and tangled in a way that felt less like forest growth and more like something had rearranged it on purpose while they weren't looking. The fire road, which should have been close, felt twice as far away as it had any right to be. Bryson tried to picture the map in his head, the one he'd looked at back at the trailhead. Camp here, ridge there, fire road maybe a quarter-mile east, and none of it matched what his legs were telling him now. Branches. A root catching his ankle. Charlie's grip tightening. Jason's name, again and again, swallowed up by trees that gave nothing back. Then nothing answered at all. For one long moment, the whole forest went still in a way that had nothing to do with peace. It was the kind of still that happens right before something decides it's done hiding. And that's when something closed the last 10 feet behind Charlie. Not from the direction Jason had gone, not from where the brush had been moving earlier. Faster than either of them even had time to register it happening. Charlie was gone before Bryson's hand even closed around empty air. 1 second, Charlie's grip was locked around his forearm, hard enough to bruise. The next, something yanked him backward by the ankles, fast and sure, like he weighed nothing at all. Bryson lunged for him anyway. His fingers caught Charlie's wrist for half a second, just long enough to feel that the skin was wet, slick, not the dry grip he'd been holding onto a moment before. And then it broke apart in his hand, and Charlie was gone into the dark, screaming something that didn't turn into words. On the drive up 2 days earlier, Charlie had talked the whole way about the girl from accounting. Said he was finally going to ask her out when they got back Monday. Had the line already picked out. Practiced it out loud in the car until Jason told him to shut up about it. That was the last real thing Bryson remembered him saying, before all of this. Bryson ran. He didn't think about it. His legs just went, crashing through brush that tore at his arms, and he made it maybe 30 feet before his boot caught a root and the ground came up fast. He hit hard, palms tearing open on rock, one knee slamming into something sharp enough to cut through his jeans. For a second he just lay there, stunned, tasting copper where he'd bitten the inside of his cheek on the way down. He was slower now, hurt. And the fire road, the one that was supposed to be close, felt like it had moved further away in the last 10 minutes than it had any right to. That smell from earlier was back, and it was thick now, right behind him, close enough that he could feel it more than smell it, warm and wrong against the back of his neck like breath that wasn't his own. Underneath it, something was moving, not footsteps, nothing that walked like a person or an animal. Something low and fast, moving on 4 points, faster than anything on 4 legs should be able to move through that kind of brush, closing the distance a little more, with every second Bryson wasted lying there. He turned once. He didn't want to. His body just did it on its own. His headlamp had come loose in the fall and was lying a few feet away, still on, throwing one last swinging beam of light across a tree trunk at head height. 4 parallel gouges had been torn fresh into the bark, same width, same spacing as the marks on the boundary post back at the trailhead, the ones Jason had called a bear scratch and nobody had bothered to measure. Except these ones weren't at head height for a person standing on the ground. They were 9 feet up. And that's when it came out of the tree line. It moved on all 4s at first, low and fast, the way a dog runs when it's closing distance, except nothing about the way its joints bent matched a dog or a bear, or anything that was supposed to be out here. Then, without slowing down, it rose. Not all the way up. Not fully standing, not fully still on the ground either, somewhere caught between the two, and even hunched over like that it had to be close to 10 feet from the ground to whatever passed for its shoulders. Its skin looked wet in the last swing of the headlamp beam, slick like something that had just come up out of deep water, even though there wasn't a lake or a river for miles. Underneath that wet sheen, the skin pulled tight over bone, every rib and joint visible, like the thing hadn't eaten right in years or had never needed to the way anything else does. Hair hung down its back in long matted ropes, dragging against its spine as it moved. Bryson didn't get a clean look at its face. He didn't want one. What he caught, in that half second before his legs finally remembered how to work again, was a mouth stretched too wide, no top lip at all, just a row of dull, flat teeth, and something long and gray hanging out past them, twitching, tasting the air the way a snake does. He didn't wait to see anything else. He was already moving, boots slipping on wet leaves, lungs burning, and somewhere behind him, he could hear it dropping back down onto all 4s, gaining. The truck was out there somewhere in the dark. He didn't know if the door was locked. He wouldn't know until his hand was already on the handle. The door was unlocked. Bryson was inside and hitting the lock before his brain had even caught up with his hands, keys already in the ignition, engine catching on the second try. His phone showed no bars, not one, which wasn't a surprise. Long stretches of Skyline Drive don't get signal, and that section had always been one of the dead ones. Something they joked about on the drive in, less than 24 hours earlier, when the biggest problem any of them had was bad reception and a Monday meeting none of them wanted to sit through. He didn't drive. He sat there instead, engine running, both hands on the wheel, watching the tree line in his mirrors for a full minute before his hands would finally work. Some part of him still expected Jason or Charlie to come stumbling out of the dark, waving him down, mad at him for almost leaving without them. Driving away without them felt like the one decision he wouldn't be able to undo, and for 60 seconds, he couldn't make himself do it. Nothing came out of those trees. Nothing at all. Back at the trailhead, before any of this, Bryson used to like these woods precisely because nothing out there ever needed anything from him. That was the whole appeal. No demands, no noise, nothing asking him for a single thing. Just trees and quiet and the sound of his own footsteps for however many miles he wanted to walk. He doesn't feel that way anymore. These days, he can't sit in a room if the window faces a tree line. He's traded his apartment twice since April, both times for units that face a parking lot or a brick wall, anything without trees close enough to see clearly after dark. The woods didn't just fail to need anything from him that night. They took something instead and never bothered to ask. Search teams worked that hollow off Skyline Drive for the better part of a week, covering ground on foot, on horseback, with dogs that reportedly would not hold a scent for more than a few hundred feet before circling back toward the trailers. They found the campsite exactly as the three of them had left it, tents still standing, cooler still half full of melted ice, Jason's flashlight lying in the dirt with the batteries dead. But no sign of Jason Marsh or Charlie Denning. No tracks that made sense for the terrain. No gear dragged off into the brush. Nothing. The park's official file lists it as a probable black bear encounter. Bryson gave his statement 3 times over those first 2 days, sitting under the fluorescent lights at the ranger station. And by the 3rd time, he'd stopped trying to convince anyone of what he actually saw. The hum of those lights is the thing he remembers most clearly now. Steady, ordinary, indifferent. And how unbearably loud that hum felt compared to how quiet the mountain had gone right before it took Charlie. There's one detail Bryson still can't explain, and it isn't the one you'd expect. It's the smell. He's smelled it exactly once before in his life, years earlier, somewhere he still won't say out loud. He hasn't told anyone what that place was. He says it's not important. He says a lot of things aren't important now that used to be. The Park Service has never reopened the case. As far as the official record goes, this was a bear. Bryson Calloway is the only person alive who was there that night, and he's the only one left to say otherwise.